Wheatley, and welcome to episode 210 of the Wheatley podcast. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thanks very much to Ciara who came on last week, talked about arts therapy, her approach to it, the differences in how she approaches it to maybe other therapists. I always find fascinating. And Ciara was brilliant, and she introduced me to her. I think it was a pet plant. It's got a name, so I guess it's a pet. And her pet rock. She has a pet plant and a pet rock. So go back and listen to Tara if you haven't done so. You can support us or buy me a coffee if you like. Link is in the description. Our guest this week is a drama therapist and others therapies. And her name is Ciara O'Sullivan. How are you doing, Ciara?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
You're more than welcome. I'm delighted to have you on. I'm not going to start off this week's episode as awkwardly as I did last week. I promised myself that if people don't know, they can come back and listen to it. But how are you doing today?
Yeah, good.
Good.
Yeah.
Um, I'm happy to have you on. I've been very intrigued by the idea of. I know you're a creative arts therapist, and I'm very intrigued by a lot of that and drama therapy and stuff. So we will obviously dig deep into that. The first question we always ask then, can you give us a short history of your upbringing, please?
Yeah, okay. I know you emailed me that question and I was like, oh God, is am I interesting enough? Who knows? We'll kind of find out. I suppose I was born in Dublin. My mom was from Finglas and my dad was from Limerick City. And yeah, we lived in Dublin for about 5 years, and then we ended up moving down to the west of Ireland to Roscommon.
Oh,
And yeah, so I spent like the rest of my upbringing in the country. Yeah, which was nice. Difficult, I suppose, at times because all my family were far, far away, So like my grandparents, like both sides were Limerick and Dublin, and back then the roads were very bad. It was actually like about a 3 hour
mm,
journey, so that was quite tough, I suppose, that side of it. And yeah, I suppose I went from like an Irish speaking school in Dublin, and it was a mixed school. And even though I was quite young, I still had like a grasp of the Irish, of the Gaeilge. And yeah, then all of a sudden I'm in an all girls Catholic English speaking school, which yeah was run by the nuns mainly as well. So a massive, massive change for
mhm.
me, personally, and yeah, so that was tough. I found primary school really tough, I suppose. And yeah, and then secondary school was great. Love secondary school because it was mixed. I
Mm,
suppose, you know, um even now I think the two schools are still separated, but there's a plan on emerging both the schools, the boys and
mhm.
the girls school, which is fantastic. And yeah, like was always, I suppose I went to speech and drama from a young age, and that I really loved that. That was kind of my thing. And I played a good bit of tennis, but that was mainly because of my brother. I had one older brother at that time when I was growing up. And yeah, I always loved like being part of plays and shows. And I suppose that's where like I was confident and kind of knew that that was kind of like my little safe haven, I suppose, where I could just express myself and be a bit silly. And, you know, um, yeah, it was just, I suppose some people would find, ballet or dance class
Mhm.
maybe, or a sport, and, I suppose things like that, where for me, it was really the drama side that I absolutely adored, and yeah, went into secondary school, obviously picked music and joined the musicals. And yeah, that's kind of when I knew really that I wanted to go down the drama route
Yeah.
at that point. Yeah. And yeah, from then on I kept kind of just doing that kind of those side of things, I suppose. And yeah, it was tough though, I suppose, like Roscommon wouldn't, like back then, like they'd have a musical here and there, or, but there wasn't really. that much. Like there wasn't like a drama school or anything
I don't
like
think
that,
there. I
you know.
still don't think there is. I'm in Roscommon right now, and it's like there's nothing going on here.
I think there's one. Yeah,
Oh, is there?
yeah, there is. I forget the name of it. I think it's Roscommon Youths
Okay.
Drama Youths. Yeah, and so that's open. I remember that's maybe 10 years now. So I would have been gone by then.
Hmm.
But it's now there, and yeah, it's great to see that that's there now. But I
Yeah.
suppose for me, and yeah, I suppose that was kind of one of the reasons why I didn't like being brought up in the West,
Yeah.
because if I had stayed in Dublin, there was loads, absolutely loads. But yeah, I suppose that's a little bit about kind of where I came brought up, I suppose, and where I
Yeah.
came from.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I suppose there's one thing, I suppose I found it hard because, my mom was from Dublin, my dad was from Limerick. I was born in Dublin, but I was reared in Roscommon in a
Mhm.
town called Boyle. And a lot of time, and even to this day, a lot of people go, "Where are you from?" And I actually I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of everything. Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of play around with that. Almost did the exact opposite of you. So I went from Westmeath to Dublin when I was 8, and went to school up there in Swords, and so it's quite different. And sometimes I play around with the idea that I'm from Dublin, but obviously I know I'm not from Dublin. I'm from Westmeath, but I do it to annoy some people, and I find it quite interesting. It's just funny when I celebrate Dublin winning the All Ireland. I think that annoys people a little bit, like
Oh,
but
of
you know.
course that would.
I'm not going to
Even I
support.
wouldn't do that.
But well, I wouldn't support Westmeath though. You know what I mean? Like, what am I going to get out of that? But I think so. We always ask then about when someone first became aware of mental health.
Yeah, that's a tricky one, I suppose. I can't really remember when. I think there was definitely questions of like, why am I feeling like this?
Hmm.
I would have been quite an anxious child, and probably as a teenager as well. And I suppose just the awareness wasn't there back then. So internally, I was kind of going, why do I feel like this? But I never kind of brought it up to anyone, or, had a chat, and it wasn't really spoken about in school, or, that kind of
Hmm.
way. But I suppose, yeah, I would have picked it up that I was quite anxious or worried about what was going around me, like, just natural, just that feeling in the stomach, and going, I don't know why I feel like that,
Hmm.
but I'd carry on, I suppose. And yeah, I suppose when I really kind of began to talk about it was actually when I moved to Wales
Hmm.
in 2011. Yeah. And in the UK, they're just so open about it. Like they were way ahead of us. And I remember it was my first week in university, and we're all first years in university, and they're all just so open, talking about anxiety and mental health and depression and medication and therapists. And I was just like, sorry, what? I'm just like this little woman from like Roscommon. And yeah, it was kind of from there, I suppose. And I went into performing arts as well, so they were very much like open about
Yeah.
things. And yeah, it was fantastic. I was like, oh, okay, so it's okay to talk about this, right? Okay. But definitely, like when I saw friends from back home, that those chats weren't happening
Yeah.
really then, like it was kind of like in Wales, like when I was with my college buddies, like, things were spoken about, which I found really interesting, and that they were just so open about it.
Yeah.
And I suppose with creativity, we bring stuff from the unconscious to the conscious, without even being too aware of it. Creativity just, or storytelling, just it brings a lot of feelings and emotions, and we connect. I
Hmm.
just feel like we just connect through storytelling, and I suppose that's what you're doing in your podcast. It really is storytelling,
Hmm.
and it brings connection. And yeah, I suppose with the course, we had to do modules on you know, like performance that use mental health, and they bring it to the theater, they bring it to the world. And so we would have had to do a lot of research on that. And so yeah, I did performing arts, but it was very I forget the word now, I've gone blank, but I suppose it was kind of more outside the box. It wasn't like
Okay.
the Gaiety School of Acting
Yeah.
where it was very outside the box, kind of alternative
Hmm.
performing arts. And yeah, so I would have done a lot of modules on I suppose thinking outside the box. How can you bring something that's an issue in the world and bring it to theaters, or bring it somewhere in a creative or performance way. So through that, I connected really with that as well, that wow, it really does bring up stuff, and yeah, loved it, absolutely loved it. And I think, yeah, I can't remember the first time when I kind of realized or became aware
Hmm.
of mental health. Like I say it was from when I was a very young age, but I couldn't name it. But
Yeah.
I think it was really when I was about 18 or 19.
Yeah.
And it is fantastic. Like I do work with children and teenagers at the moment, and it brings me kind of like, it's sad that obviously children and teenagers feel the way that they feel, but it also kind of brings me some relief that they know what it is
Hmm.
and that they can work on it, because back then I didn't have a clue,
No, no.
so that they don't feel lost in it. And I think, yeah, I think that's so important.
Oh, it's great. I picked up on something there you mentioned, and this is kind of going back to what maybe when I was like 20, 21 years of age, and I used to play in a band, so we'd do some gigs in pubs and stuff. And obviously, I had some anxieties that I didn't know what they were, but at the time, I was like, I would just have a few drinks beforehand, and I was grand. Then I got up on stage. But for you, you mentioned how much confidence it gave you, like drama school and things like that. Um, did it help with anxiety? Does it help with that kind of thing?
Well, it did for me.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, just brought me to another world, like, where you're pretending to be somebody
Yeah.
else, or you're, like it was, yeah, it really did reduce my anxiety. And it brought me so much joy. I think it was just something that really just, I just delved right into and
Hmm.
loved it, So yeah, no, I do remember like getting a bit nervous before a performance or, a show.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, like that's, to me, that was a good thing.
Yeah.
I was always said like that's a good thing that you're feeling a bit nervous, and that means that you care. You care about what you're going to bring to the stage. So I kind of use that as my little kind of like, okay, these feelings, it's because I care. And I
Yeah.
suppose that is probably what, like, that feeling most of the time, that anxious feeling is because you're worried, but you care,
Yeah.
you feel things, but yeah, no, definitely the minute I was on stage or performing, or even during rehearsals, I definitely just relaxed into it and just loved it. Yeah.
There's a weird right. So I started writing songs again after I don't know how many years. So just as a New Year, not a resolution, but kind of a thing to practice doing. And you struck a chord there with me, and that's not meant to be a pun, but there you go. But so you said about how it's bringing like the unconscious to the conscious, the mind, and I was sitting there just playing guitar, and so I was thinking like, oh, these lyrics were coming out of me, and I just wrote some stuff down. And I came back to it the next day, and I realized that a couple of those lines, without them necessarily me talking about how I was feeling at the time, that's what kind of came out onto the page, almost like a just a kind of a rhyming device that I was using, but it was exactly what was doing it. And I think it's a really for people who may not know about or haven't been to therapy, I guess, might not know about that's the way we kind of explore the mind and how we are able to show how we're feeling to the therapist. But you also have to be the one there that it prompt probably isn't the best word for it, but the person who needs to guide the client to a certain place, I think you have to be aware of how to do that. Like I think that might be the most difficult part of your job, I suppose.
Um, yes and no.
Right.
It depends. And it depends where I suppose the client is at as well. Are
Yeah.
they ready to go there? You know, maybe they're just not ready. And then really it's about, I suppose, working on calming the nervous system and finding ways to ground them for a while. You know, it just depends and until they are ready, you know.
Yeah.
And I suppose as a therapist, we have our goals, but sometimes it's just not the right time,
Yeah.
you know, and it's about sitting with that. And sometimes, you know, you can get frustrated with the process or, you know, just like trying to push it. But really, it's really about just accepting where you are at in the here and now in the process with the client as well. You know, just speaking me as a therapist, I suppose it's, you know, sometimes I do pick up that like, oh, why am I feeling like this? And it's probably kind of, is that my stuff? Is that
Mm.
what I want for them? But is that actually what they want? You
Yeah.
know, maybe, or are they ready? Yes, I may be ready.
Yeah.
As the therapist, I'm ready to move on to the next part or a deeper level, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are, you know.
Yeah.
So what I would say is that every client is so different, you know, and how I approach it as well can be very different as well. You know, I'd have, you know, sometimes, and this is really interesting, is that a lot of, you know, parents will ring me first and they'd say my child is very creative and this, that, and the other and the rest of it. And I'm like, okay, great, well, you know, most likely they'll connect with the creative side. And they come in and they go, yeah, I really don't want to do that, like, you know. I'm
Yeah.
like internally screaming. I know. And then other times, you know, parents would be worried, oh, will they connect with this because they're not really great at art or
Mm.
music or, you know, drama. And I always say, you know, I go at the child's pace, you
Yeah.
know, whatever they would like to do or bring to the therapy. And sometimes they're the ones that do the most creative work. So it's really interesting how you never know, I suppose. And I'd
Yeah.
go in with a plan, a goal, for a session and they come in and the plan has to go out the window. And you know, and I suppose it's not about I've 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 set this plan for this session and from the previous week or, you know, and I've planned it and here it is. And then they go, no, I don't want to do it, or they're not ready. And it really is having that, I suppose, awareness of where they are at to go, actually, do you know what? Yeah,
Yeah.
I've planned this, but it's not their time. And maybe it's something I might use with a different client, or maybe we might come back to it. But really it's about going, okay, and taking that plan and putting it out the window.
Yeah. I
You
think
know,
um
yeah.
you obviously like had so much passion for the performing arts. But at what point did you decide to become a creative arts therapist?
Oh, okay. So yeah, it's really interesting because I really want to do the acting
Mm.
side of it. I really want to become a performer, so or a director. And the only modules I did in my final year was performance and directing. I didn't do the applied theatre applied, which is kind of like the teaching route or
Hmm.
the community work and the facilitation part. I was like, nope, I'm doing the acting. And yeah, about a year, no, like a few months after I qualified and I was getting a bit of work here and there. I found it actually really hard to be in Wales because I did the performing arts course in Wales and you know they wanted Welsh actors or the Welsh
Hmm.
accent and things. It was quite hard to get work for an Irish girl in living in Wales, you know. So that was a bit I found that the rejection side
Yeah.
very hard. And I was working in an Irish bar at the same time, trying to, support myself. And yeah, a bit of like facilitation work came about, and I applied for it and I got it. And it was working in a very deprived area in Wales. And it was about, coming up with a drama program which will then turn into a festival for the community of this deprived area. And there would have been a lot of, I suppose, drugs involved, in the area, and just, poverty. And yeah, the children and the teenagers, they showed up every day. Like it was just, I had no idea how much it drama actually meant to some people,
Yeah.
and I was just blown away with the power of drama and that aspect of giving people a little bit of hope, or, confidence. I knew it always gave confidence because it gave me confidence, but just to see that side of drama, and I was like, wow, that's really cool. And then I got an award to create my own show and to tour it. And I was in the theater rehearsing, and the receptionist came in and she said that there's this woman from the hospital who's looking for a female actor. And I said that you're in here. Do you want to meet her? And I said, okay. And I went out, and she basically said that she works in the hospital and she supports women who have had breast cancer, and they're looking at reconstruction surgery, and that her job was to have a chat with the woman and record the chat, and just really lay back over a cup of tea. And then before the woman meets the doctor, because let's be honest, most doctors are male,
Hmm.
but most people with breast cancer is female. And so what they were finding was the women were going in talking to a male and
Yeah.
looking for advice, and they were just holding back, and it
Hmm.
was quite awkward. So this lady basically recorded the conversation of the woman and what she wanted, from the surgery, and then played it to the doctor or the surgeon, before meeting the woman. I thought that was
It's good. Yeah. Yeah.
a lovely bridge, connecting the two in a very nice, just yeah, it was just lovely. I just thought, wow, that's gorgeous. And anyway, she said, I have loads of stories, and I've been given permission to basically put them into a script,
Hmm.
and we'd like somebody to read them out. But it's going to be in front of doctors, nurses, surgeons, and the patients as well. And it was this massive project called Reconstructing Ourselves. And there was a music therapist, an art therapist, and there was one other therapist, but I forget. It wasn't a creative arts, it
Hmm.
was something else. And then there was me performing. So it wasn't
Yeah.
drama therapy or anything like that. It was just me performing. And so I said, yes, I'll do it. And so I went in and I performed in the hospital. And the stories that I read out was just like, it was like it's sad but
Yeah.
lovely. But what was fantastic was like surgeons from all over the UK came to Wales to listen to how creative arts therapies and, thinking outside the box can really help these women be supported on their journey to like going through breast cancer, or post surgery, or post, like, the reconstruction as well, that surgery as well. And yeah, I suppose after it, a lot of the patients, they were like, that was my story. And they came up
Hmm.
to me and they were like, that was my story. Just want to say thank you very much. It brought like it get like I bawled my eyes out just to even hear my story and see how far I've come, and thank you. And then yeah, I wasn't part of the actual I suppose the program or the
Yeah.
research. So I was just going in to do my piece, but I sat in for to watch to witness, I suppose, the rest of it. And yeah, there was an art therapist and a music therapist. And what they did, I think they spent 10 weeks with the women and they did art therapy and 10 weeks of art therapy and 10 weeks of music therapy. And they shared it basically and with the audience, I suppose. And it was just so like I'm actually speechless to this day. I just can't describe it, how beautiful it was. And but it's also the fact that a few surgeons got up and actually spoke at the end and they were
Right.
like, yeah, we had no idea. Like you've really given us an insight to how the patients are truly feeling and
Mhm.
we want to say thank you, and that it was kind of that moment that I was like, well, there's an art therapist there, there's a music therapist there, is there drama therapy?
Mhm.
And so I asked the music therapist and she guided me then. She said that there's a drama therapy course in Bristol, and then there's a few in London, and I'm not too sure about Edinburgh. And then I also looked up Ireland, and there was one in Maynooth. And
Ah,
I just said, it's time to come home.
very nice. It all that all lined up perfectly. It's a gorgeous idea that, um, I say grown-ups, but you know what I mean. You work with kids and you work with adults as well. But the idea that those people who had gone through, breast cancer, had to they went into something that they probably would knew very little about, the idea of arts therapy. Because if someone threw me into a room with an arts therapist, I wouldn't know what was going on either. It'd be completely new to me. But the idea that they would have found something after 10 weeks of going
Yeah.
through that, and probably at the start, and I talked to Tara about this last week, that adults would be a little more um self-conscious about, performing or drawing or whatever it might be, whereas kids will maybe get stuck in quicker. I love the idea that the people that you met and you were talking to had this kind of other experiences that they may not have been expecting at all, but clearly they got stuck into it and found something in it.
Yeah, it's gorgeous, the process of it is just, I suppose, when you put it all together, I think that's so important of the end piece.
Hmm.
And a lot of my work, really, I'm always like the ending is so important, and the fact that their ending was this performance, but what it really the ending of it is what really showed people what I suppose creative arts therapy can provide and
Yeah,
support and help and encourage and grow as well.
yeah,
Just, and you would not think that, I suppose, there is a little bit of ignorance maybe of like, creativity can be a bit airy fairy,
yeah, yeah,
and from I suppose a surgeon's point of view and their way of thinking is probably completely opposite to how a creative person
yeah,
thinks. But I think that was what was lovely, was that these surgeons were actually going, wow,
yeah.
and I just thought like, I have to do this, and I want to help people, and I can always still do drama. I can like out like outside of the therapy, but I just really wanted to become a drama therapist. Then I kind of forgot about the acting and just yeah went down that route.
Yeah, and there's something I've always found music to be particularly therapeutic in many different ways. Whether it's when you're feeling down, you play the miserable stuff, and when you're feeling up, you play it should be the opposite. But anyways, that's the way we do it. But I was speaking last week about the idea of using music in therapy and how you have to be particularly responsible as to what it is you choose. Like the idea of maybe picking the wrong thing at the wrong time could be triggering for somebody. Um,
Mhm.
how do you find your way around that kind of thing?
So I wouldn't really suggest music. I would ask them to pick something,
Hmm.
or if they wanted to, I suppose that's a little bit different. If you're a music therapist, maybe you do bring something. But for me, I always ask them, and I work with a lot of children and teenagers that are neurodivergent and they would have sensory needs. And yeah, music sometimes they really want it, and then other times it can be a massive trigger.
Yeah.
Not the song itself, it's the noise,
Yeah.
so I have to be really mindful of that, because sometimes they're avoidant to sound and sometimes they're a seeker to sound. So yeah, when it comes to music, I suppose I have to ask first.
Yeah. I often wonder that like a lot of the times whether we're being kind in sharing our music with other people or whether we're being passive aggressive at times, depending on what we pick. But there could also be that thing of there's a particular meaning in the song to someone, and they might give it to you because they want you to know the meaning, and they may
Yeah,
not.
that happens. Yeah.
Yeah, I always find that like is it the idea of they will give it to you and obviously they can explain it to it, but maybe they don't, and maybe they want you to figure it out, even though it's not that easy.
Yeah, like it's interesting. A lot of children or and teenagers, they would ask me to watch something.
Okay.
So they might give me their favorite TV show or favorite movie, or they'll talk about a character. And
Right.
I think I work kind of more towards that then. So I would watch, I wouldn't watch the whole TV series
Yeah, fair enough.
or the film, but like yeah, I'd probably do a bit of research on to like why is that their favorite character?
Yeah,
Is there a need that they bring that they don't get themselves,
yeah,
or a want, that they whether it's a superhero or a really sad, angry character, like I always kind of take that and work with that in the drama therapy room as well. Like I would ask them, like, why do you connect so much to this character, and see does what comes up for them as well. Like you'd be surprised. And I
yeah,
think I think we do. I think we do connect, like as you said about, happy music, sad music. When we're happy, we want the happy songs, and when we're sad, we want the really sad songs. And I do feel like we find characters or movies, especially from, when we're young. And yeah, there's definitely a connection there as to why.
yeah,
Like why do we like a certain movie so much? And if you really do look into it, I'm sure there's a theme within the movie that actually really holds something to you as your upbringing or as part of your life.
I go back to that with films and characters, and you may not see a film for 20, 25 years, and then you'll see the character, and you'll all of a sudden think of like it's the same as music, obviously, but it can bring you back to those moments in your childhood or your teenage years or whatever it might be, where it's like
Mm.
it's kind of startles you a bit at how something can be you can be transported by an actor. But when someone is going into see you and maybe they're a child and stuff, we talked already about the idea of that gave you great confidence being on stage. But is there a comfort in itself of being someone else in front of people?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I suppose it's a little escape, that you get to be somebody else for a couple of hours, or you can it brings a lot of laughter
Hmm.
as well. So there's definitely a little bit of that you can be somebody else. And
Yeah.
if you're not happy, there was definitely points in my life that, when I was a bit sad, and if I was to go to drama, I would become a lot happier because you just kind of switch off from it all, and you're not. I suppose for me, I was like, oh, I'm not Ciara. I'm like
Yeah.
whatever, I'm like for doing Greece or,
Yeah,
just like singing away and dancing like an Egypt and having a laugh, and definitely I see it with children in the therapy that, I do have costumes or scarves or, a few little props like a magic wand or a sword, and you do see them coming to life,
hmm,
and just that laughter that it can bring, it's certainly a release for them, as
yeah.
well.
And
Yeah.
how do you? I know this will probably depend and be very variable on the person that comes in, but
Hmm.
like with all that you do, because it's creative art and it's art in itself and drawing and music and all that, you obviously let the person lead the dance, as it were. But
Hmm.
it's like, is it the idea of I just picture a child sitting down and kind of seeing all, like, maybe it's markers or paint, there's music and whatever. You have to allow it kind of to develop that way. Obviously, you can give pointers and stuff, and you can lead the child,
Yeah,
but you
yeah,
have to allow them to lead the dance.
yeah. Like I suppose, I might bring in, like I said earlier, like I might have an idea that I think would help them process an issue or a thought, a feeling, but yeah, like I might have something all ready to go. And they're like, nah, not today, Ciara. And I'm like, okay, what would you like to do?
Yeah,
Or how about we do 20 minutes of that idea and then 20 minutes of this idea and see can you encourage them, But when they're ready, I suppose they might look at like the well-being and the
yeah,
looking at the emotions, And what I'm finding is a lot of children in particular, um, they know it off by heart. That looks like happy, that looks
mm,
sad, that looks, angry, and they're well able to name them.
yeah,
But they have no I suppose there's no awareness of what they do, the emotions, or where they sit in the body,
mm,
and what happens when we get sad and what happens when we're angry. And I think it's really learning that, when children, although that they can point and go, that's sad, they don't actually know the meaning
yeah,
of that sadness. They can see it and point at it, but if you actually work, at a deeper level, they don't really understand what happens, especially with anger,
mm,
and I always say, like, we can feel all the emotions and that's okay, but it's what we do with them. What can we do when we're angry? So instead of doing this, let's try this,
hmm,
I'm breaking it down. But yeah, really, it's when they're ready, I suppose,
yeah,
that I find that they can go to that level, or that they can tell me, and sometimes we may never reach that conversation, but un, unaware, I suppose, through the work of me supporting the parents, or and the child coming to me, and outside help as well, of course, and a few changes at home or in school, can really just naturally help the child
yeah,
grow. And sometimes in my work, I have to be honest, it's really that the fact that they are 100% heard for 45 minutes, and there's no judgment.
mm,
And I what I love, right, is when I say to a child, um, you're in charge of this room.
yeah,
You're in charge. What we do, what we talk about, you're in charge. However, I'm in charge in keeping this safe.
yeah,
So that's when I'll step in when it's got to do with safety. And it's just really
mm,
empowering. Sometimes we may not get to the conscious, and sometimes that's okay, you
yeah,
know.
yeah, absolutely. I find it interesting. You talked about, like, how maybe anger, we don't know how to. Well, some of us still don't know what to do with
I
anger,
know
but
and also we sometimes we even, I suppose, sorry for interrupting there,
yeah,
but like even as a therapist, and I do say that I'm always very
yeah,
honest with the the clients, really, I did training on emotions, and I even get it wrong
Yeah,
too.
it's fair. See, it's
So
fair.
you're
Yeah,
okay.
it's and that's but like at such a young age to start to learn these things is amazing because they may not have been there for us when we were younger, and that
Oh no.
that's great.
Jeez, no, yeah.
And another thing, what I think is interesting, how we relate colors to emotions. We all know them, like red
Yeah.
is anger and blue is feeling sad, and how that could very easily, because we've known this since we were kids, about like green is jealousy and all this kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
we could very easily as a child be and as adults be sitting there subconsciously painting something that has all these colors, but they're very specific in the feelings that the child or the adult might be using. I always find it mad that we learned this stuff when we were so young, all this kind of how colors relate to feelings and
Mm.
stuff, do you know?
Yeah, it's and maybe you're drawn to I always like it, I'm always kind of in within the therapy room. I'm always like keeping an eye out on like what toys do they always go
Mm,
for, or what colors do they always pick. And really, when you see when you see a child for a few weeks straight, you really do pick up then
yeah.
what colors they're using all the time and why.
Mm,
Yeah, you might like, especially with some boys, I suppose that red color,
yeah.
and also red has got to do with, I think, like Avengers and Superman,
Aye.
and you know, but also it's got to do with anger, and
Yeah.
you know that physical side of things as well. And yeah, it's about working on that as
Yeah.
well and
And
breaking it
with
down.
with you, Kira, as you've gone along, like, are you constantly evolving as a therapist, do you think?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And you know what? I have to say, I learn a lot from the kids.
Hmm.
Sometimes they can just bring a lot of insight,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially some of the younger kids, and also, so what I do find in a lot of my work is that if there's a child who's quite anxious and a little bit like worried all the time, and when I actually do sit with the parents, actually, a lot of the time I find actually, well, you're quite stressed and you're
Yeah.
quite worried, and I'm picking that up. And I'm wondering, are you getting support? Are you going, like, what's your self-care plan, or are you in therapy? And it's like, oh, no, 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 we'll get the child in. And
Mm.
I'm like, well, it all starts with us, doesn't it? Like, I feel like as adults, we need to represent.
Yeah.
It does start with us, and that energy. Whereas at the start, I suppose in my work, I was very much like, um, the child, all about the child. I didn't really want, like, not that I didn't want to know much about the parents, but I wanted to really get to know the child on a real deep level without any too much information from the
Yeah.
parents, because then you might get, I suppose, just sides, like,
Yeah.
maybe, or just unconsciously kind of, it might impact the therapy basically. And as I went on, I suppose I realized actually it's really important to get to know how the family runs,
Hmm.
at home, what's going on at home. And I always say to parents, there is no judgment in this room. We're like, nobody is the perfect parent. Nobody's a perfect person, but the more I know, the more I can
Yeah.
help. And yeah, and who knows? That might change in a few years, or there might be a new, like, I do a lot of CPD and, like, trainings on top, and yeah, it does impact, I suppose, how you work and how you
Yeah.
grow. So yeah, and how you see things,
Yeah.
and also your age. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I suppose maybe, as I age, my therapy hat may change with me because
Of
I'm
course.
going to change. So yeah, and that's what I always say to people, that if a therapist isn't working for you, or you're not connecting with a therapist, it doesn't mean that you're not going to connect with, and somebody else. It
Yeah.
just means that you're not connecting and you're not working great with that therapist. And it's not to say that that therapist isn't a good
Yeah.
therapist. It just means that you may work better with somebody else,
Of course.
so yeah, when I suppose, yeah, no, I think my therapy hat, yeah, will always change and adapt to it. But I always find that I get when it does change, I do find that also the referrals that I get kind of changes with that
Yeah.
as well.
Well,
Yeah.
that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, I really wanted to work with teenagers when I first started off. And for some reason, I just wasn't getting teenagers.
Okay.
And so then I did a little bit more training to help me with working with kids, like just younger, because I just like a lot of my training I did like I worked with, I suppose, teenagers because that's what I wanted. And yeah, so I did a 6 month course on working, with younger years and how to provide like therapeutic play. And yeah, I loved it, absolutely loved it. And a lot more kids were coming in and younger. And then I was like, oh, I really do wish I got to work with more
Hmm.
teenagers. And I don't know, I was just kind of listening to podcasts and things like that and working with adolescents. And then before I knew it, now it's very 50-50. Now I'm seeing a load of teenagers and I'm like, isn't like it's just mad.
Yeah.
And maybe I wasn't ready because maybe I was too young of a therapist
Maybe.
mentally probably and maybe age wise as well, that maybe I was too young back then to hold that space for the teenagers. I always find that things come around when you're ready.
This is it. What I love, obviously, the main thing is that they're getting the therapy and healing, ch the kids and teenagers. But I also like the fact that it does allow them in that space to be as creative as they like, and it'll also put in their minds that it's okay to try different things, to be out there and be trying.
Mm,
That's amazing thing because it's not that we
yeah.
forget about that side of it. We want them to feel better, but the idea that creativity, because creativity is like one of the most healing things you can do if you're in that space. So for all those kids that you've seen and teens have gone about, that have gone through, they're experiencing like art in a completely different way now.
Yeah, actually, yeah, I haven't thought about it that way, I
So,
suppose. Like, and I suppose, yeah, you actually brought up someone but they're ending with me soon, and they did say, "Oh, my mom is going to look up drama schools,"
oh wow.
and it's a boy actually, and I was just like, "That's fantastic,"
Yeah.
because I still think it's very a female thing,
Hmm.
it's getting better, but yeah, you sparked a memory or like I suppose learning from the past few years was I do a lot of slime, like messy play.
Right.
And it's meant to be very grounding for kids. And like I was mainly doing it with the kids. And didn't I ran out of time basically. So the client, because of it's messy play, and we went overtime, and then one of my teenagers came in arrived early. So there was still kind of like the slime box was still there and stuff. And I apologized. Oh, sorry that's there. And I left it, like I just took it off the table. And I noticed them that they kept looking at it.
Mm,
And I'm like, I wonder, do they want to make slime?
mm,
And they were 14 years old, and I just went with it, and I just said, "Here, do you want to make slime?" I made it with like a younger person earlier, and it was great crack. Like I
yeah.
loved it. I made my own, trying to make them like, oh, this old woman is making slime. It's fine. If she is, I can kind of way about it. And they were like, oh yeah, please. Oh, like when mom went shopping, like they told me that when their mom went shopping and they were on their own in the house, they tried to make slime in the
Oh wow.
bathroom, but they didn't want to be seen because they didn't want to be made fun of or that it's too babyish
Yeah.
and you're a teenager. I just thought, wow, like they went to that effort to try and hide something that they wanted to go back to, I suppose,
Yeah.
or maybe like I don't think slime was out maybe when they were kids. Like this was maybe 2 years ago, and yeah, it sparked up. We literally made slime for the full 45 minutes, and it was the most talk I got out of the teenager,
Wow.
and the fact that it also brought that kind of realization of trust with me to share that they hide this, like that they didn't want their man to see.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was lovely as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, and we encouraged to mix slime with the parents then.
Oh
That
wow.
was my next goal. And yeah, I think it's also, I think we forget that although teenagers, they want to be cool in front of
Yeah.
their friends, I still think that when they're at home and they're in their safe space, I still think they want to sorry, that they want to go back to a few things, or they
Yeah.
want that comfort, I suppose, of playing and
Mm.
being young. Like they may not do it in front of their friends because they're too cool for that. But yeah, I think, and even as adults, I think we should, be kind to ourselves and allow ourselves to go back, do a bit of painting, do a bit of slime,
Yeah.
do a bit of like silly dancing, and like no, like look how calm your nervous system is after it,
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. That's funny you mentioned silly dancing. I was listening to the Beastie Boys this morning. I got like on LP the
Mhm.
best of the Beastie Boys, and I was doing some seriously silly dancing to it, and it was very enjoyable. And I was just on my own and just allowing myself. And like you were saying about the teenager, wanting to be, just to have a mess around, just get a bit messy and not worry about
Yeah.
all the other the restrictions that they have in their lives. You can't be like this, you can't be like this. Then they just thought, well, slime was there and they wanted to do it. It's great. I love that. It's another thing I wanted to ask you, like when you were kind of growing up and now, like what kind of artists or actors or people do you kind of admire or enjoy?
Um, yeah, that's a hard one.
Mm,
I suppose like I was never great at reading, never had the attention span, I suppose. Found it very hard. But I
mm,
was a like what's really interesting, like because I did speech and drama, so you'd have to read a poem and a book and all of that. And I loved that, I loved reading. But when came to like a book, like I was just like, yeah, no, no, thanks. And my auntie was a principal, and so education to her, and sure didn't my mom tell her that I wasn't reading my book,
no.
like like you had to pick a book and bring it
Yeah.
home, and I was like, yeah, no, I'm okay, to the teacher. And so mom mentioned it to like my auntie, and oh, stop, sure, she brought me all around Eason's, and I was
Mm,
like, oh Jesus. And so I picked up the first thing I saw,
all right.
and I was 8, right, and I picked up Harry Potter.
Right.
And I came back home. So this was in Dublin. I came all the way back to Boyle, and I shoved it under the sofa. And then I got really ill. I was out of school for about a month.
Okay.
Like I'd have bad asthma and just chest infection. I couldn't go to school for like 4 weeks. I was bored out of my mind. And then I find the Harry Potter book under the sofa. I started reading it, and ever since then, I just loved it, fell
Yeah.
in love with it. So it's very much like Harry Potter and the characters of Harry
Mm.
Potter. And yeah, I just followed it then for throughout, like childhood and teenage years as well, because the books were still
Oh,
coming out
yeah,
at,
yeah,
yeah. And yeah, I suppose that would like that like I suppose some of the actors in Harry Potter,
yeah,
like the movie, I was like, right, I'll follow them. But I found J.K. Rowling's like history, her life, that she had nothing,
yeah,
and like she was on a train, and like I think that's just something that, I know she's in like the media now, that there's not great words really said about
not so
her
much.
now.
No.
But I suppose, despite that, I'd be very much like, if you kind of look at her life and see what she changed her life around by believing in herself. She
Yeah,
believed in herself. And I think I read up about it like years ago that she got declined by, maybe I think it was a good few publishers, maybe
yeah,
three or four, if not more. And she kept going. And I just really think that mentality, to be
mhm.
rejected so many times, but to believe in yourself and to keep going. And you know what? You really do only need one person to believe in yourself.
Yeah,
And so the publishers that believed in her in the end, like, because of that, look at the success of what her creativity.
yeah,
So I did really admire her, and like, I always believe that, if you believe in yourself, and if you keep going, I
yeah,
think, there is always going to be doors that are going to close on you, and you really wanted them to stay open, whether that's career or just life in general. And, but just try the next door, or
yeah,
try the next door after that, and just keep going. So, yeah, I would say, I suppose, not really actors or celebrities,
yeah.
really, to be honest with you. I never got into that, or even musicians. I don't know, is it because of their fame, or
Mm.
kind of, I suppose, in the noughties they were just very, like, it was, yeah, I just never really connected with them,
Yeah,
maybe. I don't know. But yeah, I connected with J.K. Rowling, and just that kind of, like, I really admired her, that
yeah.
she was divorced, she had no money, she was like living at home with her parents, and then she goes, do you know what?
All right, but yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
understand. I
So
think,
yeah,
that's uh you hear about that not the whole time, but you hear about it regularly enough about like the Beatles were turned down by record companies
that's another one. Yeah,
yeah, and you just kind of
yeah,
going, but they kind of admit that they didn't have a very good day when they were doing the auditioning. So it's like, well, that's just one of those things. And it's like the record company, in a way, wasn't wrong. If they sounded bad, they sounded bad. It's just,
true.
it's just one of those
Yeah,
things. And then they were
yeah.
great on the next day. But it is the resilience. It's the idea of the carrying on and really pushing forward
It
to
is
one of
that.
them.
And I
Yeah.
think I think children and teenagers, and that's why anxiety is very high at the moment as
Mm.
well, is that I just feel like things are fixed a lot quicker for children and teenagers now. And I
Mm.
find that their resilience, that bounce back, isn't as good as what it was in society, I
Yeah.
suppose, in people, because things are just fixed straight
Yeah.
away and replaced. But then when things aren't fixed straight away, and it is out of our control, they find that very hard. They
Yeah.
can't understand that. Maybe if they had to wait an hour for the line-up connection of Wi-Fi back in the day, maybe.
Oh, God.
But also, it's just a reminder that the world is moving
Yeah.
in a very fast pace. And I don't know what kind of, I suppose, what life, or my struggles, how I would have been able for things if it was as fast as today.
Yeah, that is a good question and one that I'm unwilling to explore for myself, anyways, because it's too daunting. But another question we always ask Ciara, what do you like to do in your spare time,
Um, my spare time.
if you have any?
No, do you know what? Like, I love walking. Walking and listening to music
Yeah,
is just my go-to, and being out in nature as well. I'm based in Dublin, but I do go home a good bit, back to Boyle, and it's just nice just to be in nature and in the parks. But yeah, like, I tend to just, I think, because the world is moving at such a fast pace, I tend to not do too much
yeah,
outside of work. I kind of just reground myself, and I find comfort in that, to be honest. I don't really, yeah, I'm
yeah.
I'm I'm very basic.
No, do you know?
Yeah.
Well, I do the same when I'm like off. I'll watch films and stuff, but that is for me. That's the grounding. Like read a
Same.
book.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I just I don't have the because I work in a gym, so I see people all the time and talk to people all the time, And there's only so much talking you can do. You gotta like just chill out and
I
relax.
think so, yeah. I
Yeah,
love being, don't get me wrong, I love being around friends. I think
yeah,
if you have a good bunch of friends and, you know, just and if the crack that you have with them, that's just lovely.
mhm.
But yeah, I suppose, yeah, there's only so much talking and doing things, you know,
Yeah.
life is just so busy that like, yeah, just
Just relax.
leave me
Yeah.
alone with a cup of tea and a book. Thanks.
That's exactly the point where we should end the podcast. Leave me alone with a cup of tea. Thanks. No, but listen, Ciara, you've been a brilliant guest. I thank you so much for giving us some time on your Saturday.
No, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me. That was
You're
a lovely
welcome.
conversation.
Oh, thank you. Listen, hang out there for 1 minute. I'll finish this off. We'll get a quick photo and we'll go on our way. Is that
Okay.
okay? Thank you, Ciara.
Yeah.
Okay, I also have to thank John for all the tech support that he does. I always thank my mum, my dad, my granddad, Ger and Calvin for their music and logo. Subscribe to us on YouTube if you will. We're on Instagram, Facebook, X, also on Spotify, Apple, Anchor, Google Podcasts. One thing that I missed out on, Ciara, where can people find you, more importantly?
Oh yeah. They can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Drama Therapy Ireland.
Mhm.
And my website is also www.dramatherapyireland.com.
And all your info is obviously on Instagram. Like if they wanted to see you in the clinic where you're
Yeah, if
working and
they
stuff
want
like
to
that.
like touch, you know, if they want to contact me,
Yeah,
all the information is there. Yeah.
perfect. Listen, everyone, thanks very much for tuning in, watching, or listening, or whatever. And obviously, once again, Ciara, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. See you next week. Bye.